Welcome back to Unapologetic and Free. I'm Lakia.
I'm Shar.
We're sisters by blood.
And friends by choice. So today I would like to introduce a dear friend to me this year. She has a special place in my heart, Allison Miller. So Allison Miller's story is one of growth, resilience, and faith. From a young age, she struggled with anxiety, depression, and a desire to feel accepted and valued. Through it all, agriculture and working with horses became her safe place and helped shape who she is today. Over time, life brought challenges that tested her identity, relationships, and beliefs. Through those experiences, she began to find healing through faith, community, and personal growth. Today, she is a wife, mother, educator, and a leader who is passionate about helping others discover their worth and purpose. Her journey is a reminder that no matter where you start, there is always hope and you can grow into something stronger than you ever imagined. Welcome, Allison Miller.
Welcome.
Hey, so to start off, I grew up tiny town. I mean, you're talking probably less than 1,000 people in town. We had a Walmart by the time I was 6. Before that, it was a general store. And before that, I'm pretty sure it was a gas station. When we got our first flashing light, not even full red light, flashing light, it was like the biggest thing in town. They had a ribbon cutting, everything. So that puts into retrospect where I spent the first 10 years of my life in kind of like that small town. Everybody knows everybody. You're related to everybody type of scenario. So I did write my story several years ago. I've shared it many places. So this is my first time being on a podcast, though. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So when I was born, essentially, I was actually born in Longview, Texas. I moved, don't remember a lot of like my very early first few years of my life. Of course, my frontal lobe wasn't formed yet, so don't have a lot of memories. My first major memory was when my mom and dad moved to a very tiny town in East Texas called Eustis over between Athens and Corsicana. And it was kind of the first time I ever saw abuse was my first memory. I was 4. We had just moved into our trailer house on a few acres. We had just gotten our first horse. And all I remember is my dad smelled like straight Jack Daniels bottle, been sitting on a shelf for 20 years. It was terrible. That's also the first time that I ever saw my mom with a physical bruise from my dad. So for me, that was kind of shocking. I was like, what's going on? What's happening? But it was my normal. So I didn't know that there was another way of life. I did not know that there was essentially a different way of how a dad should be. By the time I was 6, we had 7 horses. We were breeding. I was showing. I was doing junior rodeos. You would have thought from the outside looking in that I had kind of the perfect life, every little girl's dream. But on the inside, my dad was physically abusive to me. He was on painkillers for his diabetes. He had just gotten diagnosed with 100% disability, so he couldn't work. My mom was the sole caregiver for the house. So he took a lot of his anger for himself out on me and my mom. It's also the first time I ever broke a bone from my dad. He broke my wrist. He grabbed me and slammed me against a wall. And when I did, not knowing how to fall into a wall, I put my hand out, broke my wrist for the first time. That was probably the first time I went to school and looked for help and never got anything. And that's what slowly started to diminish my faith in people. And to top it all off, my dad was a deacon in our Church of Christ there in town. And so I never liked religion. I hated it, hated going to church. I hated every aspect of it. Because how can somebody tell me, God's going to take care of you, God's got you, God's going to do all this for you, But then I would go home with somebody that was supposed to be a God loving man, and him beat the crap out of my mom, break bones, and no one say anything, and him just get away with it. So that was hard for me as a very, very small child. It was very hard for me to accept that. And so I, at that point, stopped believing. I could care less. I was that child that still did great in school, though. I had all A's. I did my homework. I did my chores. I did everything I could to stay on his good side, because I knew if I stayed on his good side, the good things would come. I wouldn't get hit. My mom wouldn't get hit. But the minute I didn't do it his way, that was a problem. Also, in hindsight, my parents are 30 years age difference. So my dad bought my mom from my grandpa. They were Vietnam vets together. They went to the VA together. That's how they met. Was at a VA, some like men's conference for Vietnam vets that he had gone to. And my mom was so desperate to get out of her home life that my granddad from her essentially said, okay, that's fine. That pays off a debt that he owes.
Wow.
My dad owed my grandpa. So my dad essentially bought my mom at 16. So my mom and dad got married whenever in like December of 1994. My mom was 16 turning 17. And in 1996, of course, I was born by accident. So my mom was 17 when she had me. We were 2 days apart. So I was technically her 18th birthday present. She got to stay in the hospital with me. Good for her. Best present she could have asked for, in my opinion. She would have told you otherwise. She would have said otherwise. But that kind of puts into retrospective like how my dad was. He was a very transactional man. If you didn't do it his way, if you didn't buy his love somehow, you were getting beat. So the better I did at horse shows, the better I did at school, the better my mom did at work. She was a district manager for Jack in the Box by the time she was 20. I mean, it was very much of if you are not a success, you are going to get beat to success. That's just how it was. My mom and I suffered through that for the first 10 years of my life. So I always had a horse show every weekend. I never got to be a kid because I had to be the adult. I had to constantly do better, be better, look my best, things like that. My friends knew what my house was like because we all showed. So we had practice at my house. We would do mini rodeos, practice rodeos, things like that. Other than that, I never had sleepovers. I never had kind of like that little kid, early 2000s that you would have thought of, that you would have seen on TV. I also didn't have internet. I didn't have TV. I had no access to the real world until I was 10. So I didn't have Saturday morning cartoons. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't even know cartoons were a thing. Now, once I found cartoons, best believe that was me. Like I was stuck in front of that TV. I was the typical kid that we see now, right? I was glued to it because I was so taken away from it. I was very sheltered. And then my mom, when I turned 10, we decided as a family, hey, we're going to move further east towards Mount Pleasant to a little town called Hugh Springs. Now, Hugh Springs was smaller than Eustis at the time. Hugh Springs had one red light. It had a high school that was attached to the junior high, and the elementary school was down the road from the junior high, and it was the pre-K through 6th. And then you had the middle school, 7th, 8th. And then our 9th grade kids were also in the middle school with us. So it was like also our freshman campus. And then the high school was literally a breezeway across from us. That's how small it was. We had a Dairy Queen and a Berkshire's. That was it. Within 30 miles. So like if we wanted to go anywhere, we had to drive an hour. We were like, my mom was like, hey, we're going to buy 30 acres. We're going to expand our horse showing operation, cows, all that kind of stuff. So we buy this property. I'm ecstatic. I'm like, this is a way for me to get out more. I can ride horses more. I can really get away from the abuse at home. And then turntables 360 that summer, my mom sits me down and says, I'm going to divorce your dad. I can't do it anymore. It's just too much for me. I can't do it from her point of view. Now at 10, 11 years old, I am devastated. I have never known a house without both my parents. I have seen my friends go through it. I had seen other people's parents get divorced, but I had never thought I was going to experience that. And it came out later on that my mom just physically, if she would have been beat one more time, it would have wound up where she would have been dead. The last time my dad put hands on my mom, it was so bad. I do somewhat remember her going to the ER, but my memories from when I was real little are so limited because of the trauma that we suffered that I very much only remember she was gone for a few days, but come to find out she was actually in the hospital and ICU for a week. And she had to have multiple surgeries within that week. It was really bad. And so whenever she did come home, that's when she made that decision. And it shook me to my core because then when my dad got involved in the conversation, it's either him or her. And he had the animals. He was keeping the horses, the truck, the trailer. I could keep that lifestyle. I could keep my security blanket. I could keep my way out of the house. Or I could go to the unknown and live with my mom. Well, being naive and the people pleaser that I had already become, I stuck with the abuser because he had my safety blanket. And my horse that I had, I grew up on her. She taught me everything I knew. So that was the only thing I felt comfort in. I didn't feel comfort in my mom, my dad, nobody except her. So whenever he told me that, hey, I'm taking the horses. It's either you go with me and you keep her, or you don't go with me and she's gone. So, of course, I went. I realized very quickly that by going, I was now the new surrogate wife. I was now my mom. I got all the beatings. I had a job by the time I was 12. I worked at a smaller horse operation down the road from us. So I would drive to school with no license. Yes, I was illegal. I understand that.
12?
At 12,
Oh my
I was
God.
driving to school. Like I said, very small town. No one asked any questions. So I was driving to school in the raggedy old 7.3 1998, 1999 truck. I would drive to school. I would drive to work. I would drive home. I would feed work horses. I'd do my homework. I'd get beat somewhere in between there because I didn't do something right. Or I didn't park right. I didn't drive correctly, whatever it was. And then I would have to go to bed, do it all over again. So I wasn't getting to bed from the time I was 12 till I was 16, 15, 16, until about midnight every night. During that time, my dad was diagnosed with the first round of cancer, which he had to have chemo shots given to him daily. That was when Agent Orange was just really being seen as an actual disease from Vietnam. And so he had ingested all these chemicals that they eventually called Agent Orange. And it was to the point to where his livers were failing. He had hepatitis A, B, and C. His kidney was failing. It was a downhill slope. So I was missing school also in that time frame to take him to Shreveport. By the time I was 14, I had my hardship permit so I could drive across state lines legally with him in the truck. And so I was driving to Shreveport, which for us was a 2-hour drive at the time, and taking him to the VA there because they specialized in experimental treatments for Agent Orange and the cancer that came with that. And so I was giving him daily injections. I would miss school for that. I would have to go home during lunch and take care of him. I became a housemaid. And if I'm sure y'all know, y'all seen teenagers, we don't keep house.
Right.
And the house was gross, okay? And I admit that. I was a terrible housekeeper. I tried to learn how to cook. And if you ask my husband now, he's going to tell you I make 10 good dishes. Other than that, I don't cook. I don't cook. I am traumatized from my childhood for cooking. And so I very much went through that. And that's also when I was self-inflicting hurt. So I would cut myself. Now, I never did it in the way most people think. This was when the trend for erasing cuts was in kind of in trend. So I would take the eraser and literally erase my arms and the back of my legs until it physically showed. And then I was also, and people don't talk about this very much, but I had such bad anxiety that I was a picker. And so I still struggle with that as an almost 30-year-old adult. So if I have a scab, right, I have to be very cautious about how I am around that scab, because I will sit there and pick it and pick it. Even if the scab is off, I will still pick at the flesh, because like that's how I dealt with the pain that my dad was causing. The names, the physical abuse, is that if I caused more pain to myself, it was me inflicting it, not somebody else. So that's how I dealt with everything. And so I found out, actually not just here recently, that picking is a form of anxiety and depression. So when I start picking a lot, I know, hey, you're experiencing trauma. It's coming back to you. So you need to reel it back in and turn on this light. I had my window open, then it got dark. There we go. There we go. Oh, that's a lot brighter. My window was open. I don't know what happened. But anyways, and so I just learned how to have those coping skills for myself. And they were not healthy in any means whatsoever. This was also when I learned, because back then in middle school, you learned what sexual abuse was. Like, I mean, they showed the videos, they showed what sex ed was in 6th, 7th grade. And I had recently, my 5th grade year, right before we moved to Hugh Springs, I moved in with my dad. I had gone to a friend's house and her dad had inappropriately touched me. Now, nothing penetrating, nothing like that, but he was definitely grooming me for that. And so I didn't understand that. I was like, well, he wants me to sit on his lap and he wants to rub my leg and rub my back. And like, okay, whatever. I didn't know. No one had ever told me any different. It was never a conversation. Abuse was so prevalent in my life that this seemed like just another norm for me. So once I found out about that, my anxiety and depression just got worse, because then I blamed myself. Well, how did I not know? How did I not put 2 and 2 together? Why was I not looking for those signs beforehand? Because I knew what abuse was. I had it at home, but I didn't know that there was a difference. I thought it was all the same. So that was hard for me. That was really hard, especially as a teenager, trying to find yourself and learning, like having this different body, having all these hormones. That was very hard for me. And so I dealt with that from 6th to 8th grade. I lived with my dad. I was the sole caregiver. We lived just on his disability checks and what I made from my part-time job. And so we were very poor. I mean, I had very little to nothing. My first phone was a flip phone that, if I was lucky, I got minutes on every month. So I had no internet access. I could call and text. That was it. And I was secluded.
Did you have, during this time period, any contact with your mom?
I was just going to ask that.
No. So I had been alienated from my mom at this point. My dad had put into my head that my mom was cheating on him. My mom was the reason that the abuse happened. That the reason why I had all these broken bones and scars is because of her. And that with her gone and me not talking to her, this wouldn't happen. So I believed him. I said, oh, okay, absolutely. Mom's the villain. Mom's the worst person in the world. And that was hard for me as a young woman, because I was best friends with my mom before this. I mean, like, we were attached at the hip. If you saw her, you saw me. Like, I was going to work with her at times. That's just how it was. And so when I was a teenager early on, that was hard for me not to have. But that was my safe spot of, okay, well, if I didn't do this, I might not get it. Might get away with having a good day. And of course, that never happened. But when you're living with a narcissist, that's all they do. And so I didn't know any different. And so I chose not to. This is also when my mom got with my stepdad, who is currently, like, that's my dad now at this point in my life. But I hated him, because that's who my dad said. My real dad was like, that's the man your mom's cheating on me with. So that made it worse. So that alienated her even more, to the point that I was like, no, I want nothing to do with her. Screw her. I'm done. Like, I don't ever need you. Now, about spring break, 8th grade year, my mom called me And it just so happened to be, it was weird. It was kind of an awkward day, anyways. I had to take horses to the vet. I had just lost my first, we had just had our first filly for the farm, which was big. We had always had colts, so we always had little boy horses running around. This was my first baby girl, and she was all mine, all mine. I loved her to death. And a accident happened where she got caught up in some wire while we were gone to Shreveport one day, and come to find out the bone died in her leg. And on horses, there's no such thing as amputation. And I do know like now there's like some medicine, but back then there was nothing. And so I had to lead her down the road to where we were burying her. Dug her grave. I had to sit with her until the vet euthanized her. Like that was my job. That was a part of it. And while I knew what euthanasia was, I knew what having livestock meant, that you were going to lose them at times. That was hard. It was a very hard time for me because I lost my mare's, my best friend's first filly. And that's who she was. She was my world. And I named her after myself because I was like, if you're going to be mine, you're going to be mine. And no one can deny you. So her name was Alley Cat because she had what looked like a cat on her shoulder. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. And so when we lost her, my mom found out through Facebook because this was the first year I'd ever had social media. And this was when Facebook was coming into the game. And so my mom actually found out through Facebook. We had a mutual friend. So she got my number from my brother because my dad had two older sons, never grew up with them. One is 40, he's 30 years older than me. Yeah, so he's like almost in his 60s now. And then the other brother, my middle brother, is 20 years older than me. So like we never had really a relationship. I never grew up with them at this point. And so she got my number from one of them because of course they had my number. And she called me hoping I had minutes on my phone. And it was weird. I did. I wasn't even home. I had the horses. I had my mare at a rodeo that I was not competing in, but I was helping in. So I was rounding up cattle for the different events. And so I was working it essentially for free. I just wanted out of the house. And so I was there. I was right in the middle of the event. I don't even know why I answered my phone. I don't know why I had my phone on me. That's how a phone gets broke. And I just remember I answered it and I was like, hello? I didn't even know the number. I was just like, hello? And she's like, Allison, what are you doing? And I said, who is this? I hadn't talked to her in like 2.5 years. I didn't know who it was. And she's like, are you serious? It's your mother. And I was like, oh, I can't talk right now. I'm riding. She's like, well, I don't care. I think you need to come live with me and your stepdad. And I was like, I don't know about this right now. She said, well, call me tomorrow. Let's talk tomorrow. And I said, okay, if dad lets me, I will. She said, no, you need to make a way for you to call me. I said, okay. And so I did. I don't know why. Just something told me I needed to. And I called her and I said, okay, what do you want? Like, I haven't talked to you 2.5 years. You haven't reached out. You've never made the effort. I've heard what you did. I don't want somebody around me like that. Very much the typical teenage girl. I'm right, you're wrong. I know it all. And my mom has the same attitude. When I say we were the same human, we were the same human in different bodies. And so my mom's like, well, listen, little girl, you need to shut the heck up and listen for a minute. And I said, okay, whatever. I listened to her side of the story and I started to put the pieces together. She was like, I just really want you to come live with me. I think you need out of that situation. You can't bring the horse though. I'm so sorry. I have nowhere for it to go. There's no way I can afford to place it somewhere. You're going to have to let that go. And she said, but I can give you a home where you're not abused. And you need that more than ever right now. She's like, I don't know why, but I just know you need that. I said, okay, that's fine. So I agreed. I was like, you have a year. You have a year to show me it's better off with you and not him. Because at this point, I didn't know. I didn't know. All I knew is that my dad told me the reason why I was beat is because of her. My mom's saying the reason I was beat because of him. I didn't know who to believe. And so I said, okay, you have a year. You have my freshman year to change my mind. After that, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to go back and forth. I will move back I will continue the lifestyle I have. He said, okay, deal. Well, the day they do that 8th grade graduation, it's pointless as an adult, but I see as a kid, like, why it was such a big deal. And I was like, the day I graduate 8th grade, I had already packed all my stuff. My mom was like, I cannot go there while your dad's there. I didn't know why. She told me that. So my dad wasn't home. We grabbed my things. My stepdad's like, got a pistol on his side. I'm like,
He
whoa.
ready.
Like, he was ready. And now my stepdad, in hindsight, my real dad is 6'4" and probably a roughly 250-pound man. My stepdad, 5'10" at the best on a good day, weighing about the same much. So, I mean, you have two very different human beings, and he is strapped. My stepdad is literally strapped, and he's ready to go. And I'm like, you're being weird. Like, I already don't like you, and you're being weird. Like, back it up, friend.
Doing too much.
Yeah. And so then I just remember driving to their house. They were living in Tyler. And they were like, hey, you're going to go to this really tiny school called Winona. And I was like, where is Winona? And they said, no, it's Winona. And I said, oh, because they whine about everything. And I remember I was just popping off the smart aleck comments. And she finally looked at me and said, okay, you gave me a year. That means you need to shut up, sit down, and pay attention. And I said, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I did. I shut up and I sat through the rest of that car ride. And once we got there, it was this little bitty 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. And I was like, I just gave up 30 acres, all the freedom in the world other than getting beaten and having to work for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath that lives in town. Never lived in town before in my life. I was like, I hate this already. So I went in with that negative mindset. And then as the year went on, I noticed I didn't have to lie about where the bruises came from because I was wrong. Be real honest with y'all. I was a klutz. I tried band my freshman year, and I played trombone for a year. Never again in my life will I do band or try that again. Because I literally ran into somebody with my trombone, busted my lip open. My mom was like dying laughing at me. She's like, how do you not see somebody? Like, it's literally right in front of you. You're walking. And I was like, I don't know. That was dumb. But I noticed the patterns were changing. And so I said, okay, that's fine. Also in that freshman year, I experienced my first round of bullying. I had a senior in high school, of course, the freshman girl going for the senior football star, tiny town, Taylor Swift song all over again. That was me. And I was just this little girl that showed goats and rabbits and horses. And I was showing a steer at the time that was living in the barn. Like, that's all I did freshman year. I didn't play sports at this time. And so I was like, I can't go for some senior in high school. But that senior in high school also created a lot of drama. And that's when the girls in school started to bully me because, of course, they were jealous. And I understand that now. But at the time, I just thought it was because it was who I was. And I wasn't up to their level. I wasn't popular. I didn't have the nice things. I drove a raggedy old F-150 that probably should have been left in the 1990s. To be real honest with you. But it was mine. And so I loved it, but I was bullied for it. And I didn't know how to handle that bullying because I was bullied at home. So my dad bullied me for so many years that it didn't matter. And then it came into, at the end of freshman year, I did my first sale of selling livestock that I had physically raised. And that was hard. Didn't think it would be hard, but it was really hard because I found my new identity in those animals. And so my identity was always in my horse, and now it was in my livestock, and I didn't have that anymore. And then right after I was making the decision kind of where I wanted to live, my uncle called me from Sulphur Springs, where he owned a big ranch, and we traveled back and forth as a kid to it, but all my horses were on our property. And so he called me and he said, hey, your dad put your horse on the property about 6 months ago. And I said, oh, okay, whatever, like, no big deal. I'll come this summer and I can work for you since my horse is there. He said, yeah, that would be great, but your dad went and sold your horse at the sale barn down the road. And I said, what do you mean he sold her? Like, he physically can't. He was supposed to, legally, we had it on the papers that the horse was mine. But since I wasn't 16 yet, I was 15, the papers were contingent on a parent keeping the horse and sustaining the horse, because legally you're not supposed to have a job at the time till you're 16.
Oh.
And so in the eyes of the Paint Horse Association, she was not legally mine yet. On paper, yes. In their eyes, not until my 16th birthday. And he sold her a week before I turned 16. So in that 1 week, I lost everything I had ever identified as. I lost my show animals due to sale, which is what happens. Like, that was normal. Okay. I just wasn't ready for it. But then I lost my lifelong best friend. I lost the one horse that got me through all the beatings. The horse that, if I was ever kicked out for a night because my dad got pissed off about something, like the horse that took me to my friend's house up the road, if that was the horse that I would go, and if I had to escape the screaming and yelling, I would go and lay on her back and just fall asleep. And like, there's pictures out there somewhere of me laying on this horse's back in the middle of a 30-acre field just asleep, because I didn't sleep at home. If I slept, it was for short periods of time. So this horse was my life. This was my identity. I mean, like, I lived and breathed her. Like, she was my imaginary friend in some instances when we weren't together. So learning that he just up and sold her like it was nothing and didn't even have the decency to call me. And granted, in my freshman year, I talked to my dad once, and that was on Christmas. And that's because I called him because I had left something at his house the summer before when I was moving out, and wanted to know if he would mail it to me. And I just realized I had left it. Typical teenager, right? We leave things and we forget about them, and then we remember them at the most inconvenient times in life.
Right.
And he literally told me, well, that sucks for you. Go buy a new one. Your mom can buy you one. I was like, oh, okay. So it was probably the worst week of my life, because when I called him, he said, I don't see a problem here. You haven't ridden her in a year. You haven't even come to visit her. You haven't made any effort to come see her or talk to me about her. So she is worthless to me. And that hurt. I mean, that really hurt, because in my mind, I was like, but I'm your kid and you knew what she meant. Why would you do that to your kid? And then he popped off something about, and God told me I had to sell her. God told me I needed the money for X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, screw you, screw God, screw everything about it. And you can stick the sun where it don't shine, and I hope it burns you. I mean, that's just how I was so angry. And that's when anger and resentment really started to bottle up. And I didn't know how to handle that. And so I started acting out. I told my mom, fine, I'll live with you for another year. Like, we'll give it another year longer. But at this point, I just want you to know, like, if he died today, I could care less. And I meant it. I full-heartedly meant it. I did not care. And then sophomore year, we had to move. My mom was working as a general manager for Walmart, actually, at this time. And my stepdad was a bread vendor. So he's the one that put the bread on all the shelves, literally was the breadwinner. Because he sold bread. And so it was always the running joke that my mom was the bread intaker and my stepdad was the breadwinner, because he sold the bread and her store bought the bread. So it was just how it was. And so when my mom got transferred districts, they moved her to Longview, which of course was only an hour from where we were. So I was like, oh, whatever. But my sophomore year was really where I started to find myself. I found my love in ag again. I was riding for a lady that trained barrel horses down the road from us. And we had a deal worked out that I could keep my show steers at her property if I worked her barrel horses out for her when she wasn't in town, and fed and watered and bathed and stuff like that, which, say less. I ain't got to pay for it. I ain't got to pay for it. My mom was like, deal. You can have her any day you want her. And so we we were able to make this deal work. And I started to find my love in horses again. I started to find my love in what I essentially put my soul into. And that's, again, what I put my identity into. And as a kid, you put your identity in all the things that you shouldn't. And that's one of the things I really shouldn't have put my identity in, because then every time I would sell an animal, I would lose that identity. And that was hard for me. That was really hard. And so I never quite knew who I was. So of course I turned to sex, I turned to drinking, I turned to drugs. I was that typical kid that was lying to my mom where I was going on the weekends. I didn't work. It was definitely a very rocky time for me. It was the time where I let it all out. And I was a kid, but I was a kid in the worst ways possible. I was starting to fail in school. My grades were suffering. I mean, I'd never made a C in my life, and I was making D's and F's. And so my mom finally at Christmas break told me, she said, you either get your act together or you go back to your dad. Like, we can't be doing this. And that was hard. And like, now I know, like, that was really hard for her. But that's also when I found out that my mom and stepdad were fighting a lot. And I think I never really picked up on it originally mentally, but like I felt it. And that's why I started acting out, because I started seeing similar patterns, but they weren't abusive patterns. But I did see the fights. I was put in the middle of the situation. My stepdad would tell me things. My mom would tell me things. And so even though, yes, I was doing kid things, I was being able to do it, be a kid, I was still not in the best place. And I didn't know why. So I told my mom, okay, that's fine. I'll finish the school year out. I promise I'll do better in my grades. Like, I get that, if I want to go to college, if I want to do things I want to do, I got to do better. But I think I'm going to go live with my dad again. Like, if that's how you feel, because at that point I felt rejected. I felt like you don't want me. And my dad, even though he was abusive, he always wanted me there to abuse me. And I didn't think that at the time. I was just like, but he wants me. He always wanted me. I made this decision to leave. Like, he never asked me to leave. You asked me to leave him. And so I finally decided during spring break, I was like, I'm going to go live with dad. I'm going to go. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this whole, you always threatening to send me to my dad's, things like that. And so, but yeah, so after sophomore year, I packed my truck up, my little Ford F-150 that was going out, didn't have AC, had a creak in the door. I loaded it up and I said, okay, bye. And I did. I moved. I had a trailer that I had bought for my steers. So I moved my steers down to this little bitty town in West Texas called Bangs. Now, Bangs is so much smaller than even my original town. Our school there was a high school, a middle school across the street. The elementary school was right down the road. And in my graduating class, there was 60 kids. And the district total might have been 500 students. Might have been. And my district, the radius of it was 25 miles. So from the school, the bus traveled 25 miles away from the school to pick kids up. It was so small. The town didn't have a lot. I mean, it was rough. But I had a horse again for a little bit. I had all these promises. My dad was like, I'm never going to hit you again. And then I get there, and within the first 2 weeks, of course, it's summer. Your girl has been partying for the past year and a half. Whatever she wants ain't going to change. I am 16, 17-ish at this point. I said, forget your rules. I am not listening to it. And he caught me sneaking out. Well, okay, I snuck out of my mom's house. Like, who cares? Well, I got beat for that, which, okay, to his point, I probably deserved a good butt whooping. In all fairness, I probably did. But the way he did discipline was not correct. And so I got my first beating again with him, and he kicked me out. And so I was homeless for 2 weeks. So I moved in with him, and then 2 weeks later, he kicked me out and I was homeless. And I lived in my truck. I had just the clothes on my back. I had a spare set of shorts and a pair of boots, and that was it. So I very quickly had to get a job because I was jobless because since I just moved there. So I very quickly had to get a job. And I worked at Little Caesars there in Brownwood, which was about 15 miles from Bangs, literally down this really long hill. And there's many of times I remember at the very top there of this hill was like a rest spot, which is like a trash can and an awning for you to have picnics. I remember very clearly sleeping in my truck there and freaking out because the crack corner of the town was literally at the bottom of the hill and being so scared that somebody was going to come and break into my truck and try to steal me and my truck. And then I talked my middle brother, so my little bit older brother than me, from my dad, his second born, lived in the same town as us. I called him, finally broke down, swallowed my pride, and said, hey, I need somewhere to live. Can I please come live with you? Dad kicked me out. I got beat for doing what I wasn't supposed to be doing. I understand I was wrong, but I can't keep living in my truck. I don't know what to do. I have a job. I can pay my way. I can pay rent. I can watch the kids. He had 2 kids at the time. I was like, whatever I have to do, I'll do it. But I can't keep living in my truck. So he says yes. So I move into a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, 900 square foot house with him, his wife, and 2 kids. I lived there from probably about July of that year to November and it was great. I didn't have any issues there. I mean, I was a typical teenager still, but I followed the rules because I didn't want to be homeless again. And then I am an avid hunter, so I love to deer hunt. Like when I lived with my mom, that's all we did in the fall. So I was literally obsessed. And my mom had told me, because I was contacting my mom while I lived with my dad and homeless. I never told her I was homeless. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to get yelled at. No, thank you. And so she had told me, hey, I'm going with her stepdad to the deer lease down in South Texas. If you want to go, for Thanksgiving break, you need to be here on Thursday when you get out of school. So see if your brother is okay if you skip, because we had a half day that day. He's like, see if he's okay with you skipping so you can drive up here, because it's a 4.5 hour drive from his house to my mom's house in East Texas. She's like, ask him if that's okay, because I don't want you hitting Dallas traffic down 20. Fair. His wife says, no, absolutely not. You can't miss school. And at the time, I didn't understand why. Now, as an educator, I get it now. I get it now. I understand how important it is to be in school. But at the time, I was like, it's a half day. Who cares? I want to go. And so I did. I talked my real dad in, because he only talked to me when he wanted something. And at this time, he wanted money from me. And so I said, okay, I'll give you money, but I need you to call the school and tell them I'm sick. Because the school doesn't know the difference. Like, they don't know what's going on. And I never confided in anybody, because when I was a kid, being sent to school in a cast never got any attention. No one ever cared what I had to say. So no one's going to care now. Who cares? I'm in high school. They're like, you're almost an adult. Who cares? So I definitely, I conned my way. I definitely manipulated the situation to better suit me. I understand that. I was wrong. It's fine. And so I did. He wanted $100. I don't even remember what for. And so I gave him the $100, and he did. He called the school and said, hey, Allison's sick. She won't be at school today. And I loaded up. I told my sister-in-law, yeah, I'm going to school, and I'm going to leave right after school. Because she wasn't saying no, I couldn't go. She was just saying, you can't miss school. You get out noon. You can make it to your mom before traffic. Like, you're going to be fine. I loaded up like no big deal. I packed my bags in my truck. And I think that's where I messed up. I shouldn't have put my bags in the truck that morning. I should have done it after everybody was asleep that night. Because then she went into my room at like 10 o'clock. I was already past Stephenville at this time. So I'm over an hour away. And she calls me on the day I'm supposed to be at school. And she's like, where are you at? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm at school. And she said, I up. I said, well, I'm past Stephenville. Like, I'm coming in. I don't even remember the town. I think it's like Heiko or something. No, Comanche. I was coming into Comanche. And I was like, I'm across the street from the courthouse in Comanche. I'm at the red light. I'm heading to mom's. And she's like, don't come back. She's like, I'm not doing this. You can just not come back to my house. I'm not going to have you around your nephews. And so, yes, it was my poor decision. But then again, 16 years old, 17, I'm homeless again. I don't tell my mom. I go to my mom's. I have a great week. Whatever. I go back. And again, I'm sleeping in my truck. I go get my things. And I was so used to living out of just a few things and living out of my truck. I only had about 10 outfits anyways. And so luckily I had saved up enough money that I bought a fake ID to be able to get me a hotel room. Yes, I was that child, but I was not doing it for bad reasons. Like I did not have it to where I was old enough to buy alcohol, only to get a hotel room. And so at the time there was a little Motel 6 pay by the hour in Brownwood that was like $60 a night. And so I would work my shifts at Little Caesars and then I would pay for the week every week when I got paid and I was living out of a hotel. 16, 17 by myself. And that's when I learned being an adult sucked because I had no choice. I was buying all my own food. I was having to take care of myself. No one knew what was going on at school. My mom didn't know. My dad knew because he knew the situation because him and my brother were really close. And I was the black sheep of the family. And so, but he didn't even care. He would only call me, tell me to come. I would go home every once in a while to his house because he would like make up. He'd say, I'm sorry, because he wanted something. And then he's like, hey, I need $200 or $300. And the first time I made him mad, being a typical teenager, he would say, okay, peace out, get out of my house. So I'd pack back up. I'd go back to the motel. I'd stay there for a couple more weeks. And like the patterns just continued. Finally, I was at our county show there in Brownwood. And this old man, I was brushing my steer. And okay, for steers, they have a hair class, right? So like literally kind of like beauty pageant, you want their hair to be like a certain way, so fluffy and shiny. I was brushing him and I just bathed him, just blow dried him, all these things. This old man comes up to me and he's like, hey, have you showed yet? And I said, no, he's not very good. Like, I don't really have a good steer this year. So I don't think he'll make sales. So I'll be, trying to sell him after the show today. And he was like, well, I'll buy your steer. He's like, I need a good feeder still. Steer, I'll buy him. I said, oh, absolutely. Thank you. So we make this agreement on how much he's going to buy the steer for. I agreed, hey, I'll take him to the slaughterhouse here in town. We'll get him processed for you, things like that. This is how much the slaughterhouse had already told me it's going to cost for me to get him slaughtered. And he's like, I've seen you.
So that means you sold him to kill him?
Yes. So like he was a market animal. And so at this point, I knew what that was like. And I wasn't attached to him because I'd been living in and out of a motel and he was staying at the barn for the school. So I never had to tell anybody, never had to go to anybody's house for him or keep him anywhere because the barn was paid for every month. So it wasn't a big deal. And so I was selling him for him to essentially have in the freezer, which was fine, whatever. I understood. At that point, I wasn't growing attached to my show animals. So I had him, I had a goat, had some rabbits, and my rabbits were living in the back of my truck. I just never told anybody that because during the school day, I go drop them in the pen with my steer. And it was really funny. One day, my ag teacher pulled up to the barn during the school day and he called me. He's like, Allison, why is your rabbits here? I said, my pen broke and I just I needed somewhere to keep them for the day till I could go to Tractor Supply and buy a new pen. And I was lying out my butt. I mean, it was bad. It was a really bad lie too. Like I knew he knew I was lying, but he was just like, I don't even have the energy to deal with you today. Got it. Okay, cool. And so I just remember him saying, Allison, don't get your rabbits out of my damn barn. And I said, okay, yes, sir. Got you. And that was Mr. Stork. So Mr. Stork was my ag teacher. And he's also my idol for like how I wanted to be as an ag teacher later on. And so he was this like grumpy middle-aged man. And I was like, Mr. Stork, I'm so sorry. He's like, Allison, shut up. Come get your rabbits. He literally pulled me out of class to get my rabbits that day too and made me keep them in my truck. I felt really bad for my rabbits, so they were nice. And so I was talking to this man, and he was like, I've seen that truck before. Do you all live in that motel? I kind of played it off. I said, oh, well, our house is being renovated. And so I live with my sister-in-law, my brother, but their house is being renovated. And my room right now is being the one renovated. So I can't stay in the room, and I have nephews. And so I don't want to stay in the living room. So my sister and brother have bought me this motel room for the last few weeks while the house gets renovated. He's like, well, hey, I live across the street from the school, and in the barn I have an apartment. Would they be okay if you stayed there? And it's rent free. Y'all don't have to pay for it. And it was really the first time I saw kind of God open a door without me realizing he was opening a door, because I was definitely not in a good environment. I mean, my neighbor next door in the motel was doing crack and shooting up crack every night, and you could hear him having like hallucinations and going through like these episodes. And it was scary to be a teenager and hearing that and seeing that, and just knowing that was my daily life. I didn't really care because I at least had a roof over my head. And so I said, absolutely, let me call him. And so I of course, called them. I called my friend, and it was my high school best friend, and she knew exactly what was going on. But of course, like, high school girls, we keep each other's secrets from our parents. That's who we call when we say, hey, we're going to be at your house, but I'm really going to be at this boy's house type of thing. And so she kept my secrets. And so I called her and I said, hey, da 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 da, is Amanda there? And that was our keyword, that she needed to be my sister-in-law. And she was like, oh yeah, like in the worst man voice too. Like, I don't even understand how we passed this off. And she's like, okay, hold on. And then hands the phone, like acts like she's handing it off. And then she's like, yes, honey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so bad at this. So bad. And we come up and lied to this old man. And now I feel bad for lying to him, because he did a lot for me my junior and senior year in high school. And he opened his loft apartment to me. And so I had a very safe place to live. He said, hey, and if you ever need, anywhere to keep your show animals, I rent out pens in my barn to the local 4-H kids. So if you need a pen, it's $100 for the school year. Well, that's a lot less than what I'm paying now at the school barn. Heck yes. And so I started renting pens from him for my animals. And so this old man, I moved in and out of his loft for the next 2 years. And finally, towards the end of my senior year, I kind of fessed up and I told him what was actually going on. And he was like, well, what can I do for you? And I said, honestly, you've done so much. Like, there's really nothing you can do. I was an 18-year-old senior. So legally, it was my responsibility if I wanted to report the abuse. Like, he wasn't a mandated reporter, so it was on me to report it, and I was never going to. And I told him that. I said, it's not worth it. I said, no one's listened to me yet. I'm 18. I'm an adult. There's just no point in hashing these wounds. So at spring break, I moved back in my senior year with my dad, because I got into some financial troubles and I couldn't really afford, while living at this man's place was free, I still did help pay for like the utilities I was using. But then they shut down the Little Caesars because they were remodeling it. So I didn't have a job for a few months. And so I couldn't afford to pay the utilities. And I was definitely the kid that's like, if I can't pay my own way, I'm not going to be here. So I sucked it up. I made peace with my dad, and I moved back in with him. And right before this, he married his 9th wife. Yes, 9th. I know that. Yes. 9th wife. They actually got, so in Texas, you can only legally be married 7 times. 2 times he was married in Oklahoma. So that's how he got away with his 9th being in Texas.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Fun fact. I didn't know that either, because I looked it up. I knew he'd been married a bunch. And so I was like, oh, how many times can you be married in Texas? So I went to Google snooping, like any teenager, like any young adult. And I found out the answer, and I was like, oh, that's sad. That is sad, man. So sad. And so he married this woman. I hated her with every fiber of my being, because the first time I ever met her, she looked at me looked me up and down and said, ain't no man gonna love a woman like you. That can't even have a job because he's 100% disabled. He's lazy. He's an abuser. And yeah, you with him. So I guess you ain't no better than me. Guess we're on the same boat, honey. And I walked off. Yes, I was a terrible human being. Yes, I should not have said what I said, but I didn't care. I was 17, almost 18.
And she came for you.
Right. I mean, I can't help that you asked for it. I can't help it. Right, gosh. At that point. And so I moved back in with my dad. I lived there for the rest of my senior year, and it sucked. She broke 2 of my ribs because I got into a fight with her over my steer. I was leaving to go feed my steer because luckily the old man still let me keep my animals there, even though I couldn't pay him. I couldn't pay him the rest of the money. But he still was like, hey, your steer's here, your goats are here. Like, you're fine. I'm not going to hold you to it. You know, you've paid your way by paying the utilities for the apartment. Like, you're good. And I was so thankful for that. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these animals. Like, are they going to live tied up to my truck? Are they going to live in the back of my truck? What am I doing? And so I was leaving to go feed the steer, and she popped off about something. And I had such a bad attitude and such a bad look at life that I popped back, and it got physical. Granted, I was in the wrong because I pushed her back. But again, you laid hands on me. So, of course, I was going to lay hands back. And how it was is like our house was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And so it's one of those old farm style houses. So the back door had a mudroom and a sink with it. The sink top was not a flat edged sink. So it was made out of mortar and rock. Super cool, right? Like, as an adult, I would love to have that in my house. But when you're forcefully pushed into it, it cracked 3 of my ribs. It displaced 2 of them. I mean, like, I was pretty beat up from the edge of that sink. And I looked at her and I told her, I said, if you ever lay hands on me again, I'm old enough now. I'm not afraid to lay your old ass lady out. Like, I will literally put you on this ground. And so I left. Of course, I was pissed off at the world. I went and fed, and the cycle kind of continued. She didn't lay hands on me after that for a while, but she definitely, she would make jabs, make them right back. My dad and I would get into it, and she'd step in between. I'd tell her to find her place because this ain't her place. I was definitely not the best child, and I understood that. I understand that now. I was not in a good place. I hated everybody. My anger had a hold of me. I was a substance abuser for alcohol. I was going out and drinking every chance I could because that was the thing to do in a small town. And it was a way to forget about what was going on in my personal life. And it was a way to fit in. So that's what I did. And finally, a week before I was graduating, I got a job opportunity to go and intern near my mom's house at a horse farm that raised show horses. They called me and they said, hey, are you still graduating high school on time? I said, yeah, graduating with honors. I'm top 10% of my class at this point. Like, I got my school life together. They said, what are you doing for college? I said, I'm going to go be a nurse. I was going to get away from ag because I thought that was, even though I loved agriculture, I loved what I did, I thought that was a lot of the issues and the patterns is because I was always around these people in ag, and that's how they all acted. So I need to get away from that in order to get away from this life of abuse. And so I said, I'm going to go be a nurse. And he was like, the owner of this ranch was like, well, I really need somebody that I know that I've worked with that has experience with horses because my wife is going through cancer. And so I need to be there for her, but I still need my horses to go to shows and do all these things. And he's like, I'm going to pay you for it. You can't live on site. The extra house he had on the property was being used by the ranch hands. So he's like, I don't have a house for you, but could you live at your mom's? And so I said, well, let me ask. I called my mom and I asked her, I said, okay, hey, I have this opportunity. I can pay my way. You know, she's like, Allison, you can come back and live. You're graduating high school. You're going to college. You've been accepted on a full ride. You've gotten scholarships. You've done all these things. You can absolutely come home for the summer before you go to college. No need to pay me. And I said, okay. So I did. I went and worked for him. But a week before I graduated high school, me and the wife, she stepped in between me and my dad. And she backed me into a corner and raised her hand at me. And I had already told her, you touch me again, things will get bad. And I didn't even give her a chance. And I punched her. And then I got assault charges put on me because I was an adult. And even though I was in high school, I technically had assaulted her because I did not get hit first this time. She just raised her fist at me, even though I felt threatened. Did not matter in the eyes of the law. So I did go to county jail for 2 days. I worked my butt off. I did get it expunged. It's sealed because technically, since I was still in high school, I was able to do it as a extended minor or something like that. It's a weird kind of time frame when you're 18. If you're still in high school, you can get away with certain things and you can do judified deferment and like kind of be on probation without being on probation. And it doesn't go on your record, which at the time is that one need to be a nurse. Like that was very important. And I had never even gotten a speeding ticket. So I had a clean record. I was just like, yes, it was self-defense. I had, medical records to back up that my dad was abusive. So I did fight it. I fought it in court. Luckily, later on in life, I did get it removed from my record, but it took a lot. It took a lot for me to do that. And it took a long time. But luckily I did or I wouldn't be an educator because that's not okay in the state of Texas as an educator. So that happened. And then after I got out of jail, of course, I didn't have phone. Like they don't let you have phones. I tried making a phone call to my mom, but the number I dialed was the wrong number. I didn't have my phone to look up my mom's new number because she had just gotten a new one like 6 months before and I hadn't learned it yet. And so I called the wrong number and definitely hung up very quickly when I realized. I was so embarrassed. But that was my one phone call and I was stuck. I was stuck like Chuck for 48 hours. So when I got out, I called my mom on my phone to tell her what happened because my mom was like, let me find out. And come to find out while I was in jail, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And now it was stage 1. So it was something they were like, we can go in, take the node out of the side, take the lump out, take the node, test your lymph nodes. And then if we need to take those out later on, we can. But with stage 1, super early, we can get through this. Very minimal, if any, chemo radiation. So while I was home for the summer, she got it removed. At that point, she had left Walmart, was running a bread route like my dad. So they both had bread routes. So I called them the breadwinners. They were dual breadwinners at this point. They both worked for Mrs. Baird's. And so Mrs. Baird's at this point was switching to a different company, like another company was buying them out. And their mascot was a little teddy bear. And so I was definitely calling them the teddy bear breadwinners. And I was like running around the house telling them this, and they didn't think it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. They did not think so. And so I would always get these weird looks, but I would run her bread route on my mornings. So I would get up at 2 a.m. I would run her bread route for her while she was going through the treatment and having surgery that summer. And then I would be done probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. So from 2 to 10, ran her bread route. And then from 11, I was able to get to the ranch at about 11:30 normally. From 11:30 till about 8 o'clock at night, I'd work on the ranch for my internship, which taught me so much. And I'm so grateful for. I'm so grateful that I put that work in that summer. And then I'd go home, take a shower, go to bed. So I did not have a summer before my freshman year of college, which was fine. I was used to working a lot. It wasn't a big deal. And so I did all that. My mom came out successfully and they said, hey, you're in remission, which was all we could ask for. Yeah. And so we, moved on with life. My freshman year of college was great. I went to San Angelo. I kind of got the freedom I always wanted without someone looking over my back. Now, don't get me wrong. My mom was definitely like, every time I talked to her, she was like, you're doing what? Why are we doing this, Allison? You've done this now for so many years. I said, yep, I'm an adult now. I live on my own. You can't tell me what to do. And she's like, whatever, I'm done. I'm done with you. And so she let me live my life. She definitely gave me the mom advice though, and would send me, she had Snapchat, and that was really funny because she would send me like the mom look on Snapchat, and she'd be like, open your Snapchat. And I'm like, why? I don't want to. No, thank you. And so I lived freshman year. That was fine. Sophomore year, I moved in to an apartment because in Angelo, once you had 60 credit hours, you could move out of the dorms. Well, I took summer classes. I said, hell, I ain't living in these things more than a year. So by spring semester of my sophomore year in college, I had enough credits I could move out. And so I did. I moved into this apartment that was like a dorm, but you had your own bedroom and you still had the freedom that you didn't have in a dorm. So I still lived with 3 other women, but we had our own bedroom, own bathroom. We just shared a commons area and a kitchen, which I worked 2 jobs. So I wasn't ever home. I was bartending and working on horse ranch. Like I was never home. And so it wasn't a big deal. And when I was moving in though, I had a friend who was on the softball team and her boyfriend were like, hey, it's just you. If you need help moving and buying like all this furniture and getting it into your house, into your apartment, call us and we'll let you know. And so I was like, absolutely, I need help. I am pitiful. I am 21 years old. At this point, I'm like, I am so ready for help. And so, or I was 20. That was in April, 1st of April when I was 20. And I was moving in and he sexually assaulted me in my new apartment because my best friend, my college friend, she was my best friend at the time. She was at softball practice. He was the only one that could come help me. She was going to meet us at the apartment when she got done with softball practice about 2 hours after we started. And during that time, he forced himself on me and sexually assaulted me. And of course, after that, I was so torn up and so like, why does the abuse keep happening? Why do I keep having all these bad things happen to me? That I called her and I said, hey, I just decided I'm done for the day. I don't want to do this right now. And I shut down and I hid it from everybody. I was dating at the time this really abusive guy, but he was abusive like my dad was. So like if I just didn't make him happy, then he'd hit me. And so I was like, well, that's my normal in life. So I don't really know a different positive way to be. And I, kept living life. And then that was on April 10th of 2017. And then on my 21st birthday, we were all out at a local pub there in San Angelo in front of the college. And I was drinking. Of course, I was turning 21. I could legally drink at this point. Absolutely, I was drinking. What new 21-year-old wasn't? And I got really sick. And I was like, something is not right. I've never gotten sick drinking. I was drinking my normals and I just felt very nauseous. And so I went home and I was like, my best friend was like, well, take a pregnancy test. Like, maybe you're pregnant. And I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way. I'm on birth control. There's no way. Come to find out I was. And what's bad and how I knew it was from the sexual assault is that I had not had intercourse after that because I was so traumatized. I was so hurt. Even when my ex would, like, I would rather take the beating than have intercourse at that point because I was so ashamed of myself. And so at that point, I called my mom and I was in tears. And I said, Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm pregnant. I am only probably about 4 weeks along at this point, 3 weeks. Like, I don't know what to do. This is what happened. That's the first time I told anybody. What happened was to my mom, and she was 5 hours away from me in East Texas. And she was on the phone with me. She got in the truck and started to drive to San Angelo. She was like, I'm about to go to jail. Allison, you need to bail. Where's your credit card? Because you're going to have to bail me out of jail. I'll pay off your credit card. I said, Mom, you're not going to do that. Like, we're not doing this. It's not worth it. Because that's all I knew. All I knew was abuse. And I saw what it was like not to have abuse when I lived with her for a little bit, but I didn't see it long enough. And I had been involved in it for so long that every man was like that. Even my stepdad, I thought my stepdad was like that. I just never saw it. He just never had the guts to hit me. And so I talked her down. That was the first time I ever saw my stepdad really stand up for me and kind of put his foot down and say, absolutely not. And truly, that's when I started to see him as a dad because he was just as mad as my mom. And so I, got them talked down. I mean, my stepdad was ready to go to federal prison at this point. Like, he was going to commit murder and be happy about it. And so I talked him down. I said no. And my mom sat there on the phone with me and she's like, well, what do you want to do? She's like, you can stay there and raise a kid by yourself because I'm 5 hours away, Allison. I can't move down there. You're an adult. I can't pick up my life for this instance. She's like, I just can't. My oncologist is here. All these things are here. I can't leave this area. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. I can't